Welcome to BVTV Diner. Grab a seat, pour yourself a good cup of coffee, and settle in for a great conversation. We're going to be talking with the author of the novel When Women Were Dragons, Kelly Barnhill. Her stories remind us just how powerful and magical storytelling can be, from best to unforgettable characters. We turn to storytellers like her for inspiration long after we've turned the last page. As you can tell, Kelly Barnhill isn't just an author. She is a born storyteller, and we're so glad to have her with us. So joining us and welcoming Kelly Barnhill. Kelly, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to chat with you in the BVTV Diner. So let's just dive right in. A little background information. Who or what made you become a writer?
Oh, geez. That's a great question. I started, where do I start? I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and I had a lot of cousins and kids that would be, getting childcare at my house. And because I was the oldest, I would be in charge of telling stories and of entertaining the younger kids. And so I started telling fairy tales when I was really young, as a way of keeping the younger kids out of my mother's hair. But really, I think that I first started wanting to be a writer was in 7th grade. I had this really awesome teacher named Sister Duran. And Sister Duran was awesome. She was a nun, obviously, and she was about 6'3" and looked like she was made out of barbed wire. And she we had this story writing workshop or a unit where we had to write a short story a week for 6 weeks, which is really hard, by the way. Nuns. So I'm not sure I could do it now, and I write for my job. But we had to produce a full short story every single week, and for me, that was when I first had an inkling that the stories that were inside of us were inexhaustible. That we tell stories when we're not even planning on telling stories, and we're thinking stories when we're not even planning on making a story. And so that was the first time that I sort of understood that, I think. And it isn't that I've been writing ever since. It sort of has come and gone, depending on where I was in my life. But that was the first time that I thought maybe I could do this all the time.
I love that. What is something that you want our viewers to know about you?
About me?
Yes.
I've had a lot of jobs in my life. I've been a teacher, and I've been a bartender, and I was an activist for a while, and I was a receptionist for a while, and I worked in a carpentry shop for a while, and I delivered phone books for a while, and what else did I do? I was waitress for a while. I worked in various group homes for a while, and I got fired a lot. And so it's good that they let me write write stories for my job, because otherwise, I think that we would be rather hard up financially. At some point I realized that that my work was best when it was coming from me, rather than coming at me from without. My work was best when it came from within rather than without. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mentioning all those jobs, which one was your favorite?
Oh, good question. I really, my husband and I we both worked for the Park Service. We were park rangers over in Olympic National Park, and that was amazing. I was extremely close to a mountain lion one time. I was extremely close to a black bear another time, but there was also a herd of elk that was sort of in the same valley as us, so we would sort of see them moving around. You could smell smell them from across the mountain. And that was an amazing job. But I loved being a seventh grade teacher. Actually, seventh graders are the best. And they have the entire range of human emotions, like all within 4.5 minutes. And I really loved being a teacher very much. I didn't love the sort of, I didn't love all the meetings. But I loved teaching, so I did like that a lot.
Awesome. All right. And then for your journey, how did your journey as a writer begin?
It's a really good question. I was a teacher, and I became a teacher in Minnesota probably the worst time. It was when the way in which school funding was completely revamped, and a lot of us were laid off, and it was difficult to get a job as a teacher after that. And I had little tiny kids at the time, and so I had to figure out something else to be able to make ends meet. And so I ended up, I had to do so much writing in terms of like curriculum and creating materials and stuff like that for my students. So I gathered a lot of that together, and I used it to pitch stories. And I wrote for a lot of different publications. I wrote for like trade magazines. I wrote for a magazine called Twin Cities Luxury and Fashion, which was hilarious to me because I didn't even wear makeup to my own wedding. But I started writing high interest nonfiction books because I had literally just written a cold letter to a local publisher that does a lot of schools and libraries books that I had used a lot of their materials as a teacher, and I thought, okay, I'll see what I'll see if maybe they want to hire me, and they did. And so I wrote a bunch of I think 13 high interest nonfiction books for third and fourth graders. And I think that really is what put me onto the path that I later on ended up in, because I was writing a lot of short stories, and I was starting to publish my short stories, but I was writing these books to make money, and to just to fill in some gaps as we were sort of navigating through having a small family, and so, but it was really interesting because I had to do all this research to write them, and I had all these rules for how I had to craft my sentences, and I had to get very good at honing language. I had limits on how long my sentences could be. I had averages for how long my sentences could be. I had limits for how long my paragraphs could be, but they also had to be punchy, and they had to be funny, and they had to be correct. And so I got really, really good at language and voice as a result. Which was and as I was writing sort of more and more sort of imaginative and speculative and kind of fantastical short stories for adults, that started to bleed into my work for children, which is how I ended up writing middle grade novels. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then for your inspiration for When Women Were Dragons, what was the inspiration behind writing this book?
So, When Women Were Dragons, I wrote that book in a very different way than I've written any of my other books. The rest of my books I wrote longhand, and the rest of my books I sat with for a long time before I could even start with the longhand work. My books typically start with a box where my thoughts will just kind of live for a long time, and then I will write the first draft longhand, and then I'll put that away and I'll rewrite my second draft from memory. I used to erase my drafts, but that gave my husband an ulcer, so I don't do that anymore. But I do rewrite from memory. So that is how I typically write. This one was totally different. I had written Girl Who Drank the Moon, which that's the book that will outlive me. It won the Newbery. It's been translated into 37 languages, and I I felt kind of at a crossroads. Trump had just been elected, and a lot of things were happening in the country that I was really upset about, and becoming more and more upset by the day. And I wasn't sure if I was going to write another book. I wasn't sure if there was a place for my voice anymore. And I wasn't sure if I even wanted to have another contribution to the world as it was right now. I couldn't see a way forward. And I had said yes to writing a short story for an anthology about dragons, mostly just because the editor is an extremely nice person, and you just always say say yes to Jonathan Strand. He's lovely. He's a lovely man. Okay, yes, I'll do this. This will be my last thing that I do, is what I thought at the time. And I was putting it off. I didn't have an idea. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was in the car, and I was listening to the Kavanaugh hearings. When Justice Kavanaugh was facing all kinds of allegations about sexual impropriety. And I was in the car with my daughter, who was a junior in high school at the time. And I realized with this sort of horrifying dread that I was her exact same age when Anita Hill was in that same chair, facing that same body with those same allegations. And here we were exactly one generation later, and we were in the same damn place, And what I felt was this sense of rage. I felt so angry. I felt as though my skin was on fire. I felt as though the car was on fire. I felt like I could light up the whole street. There's more to that story, but that's the bare bones of it. But I dropped her off, and I'm feeling this sense of rage, and I'm listening to Christine Blasey Ford, who I dedicated this book to, talk about memory and trauma. And the relationship between memory and trauma. And I thought, you know what? I am going to write a short story for Jonathan Strand for this anthology. And it's going to be about a bunch of 1950s housewives who turn into dragons and eat their husbands, because that is where I am right now. And so I went home and I wrote the first chunk of this novel. And it happened in a different way because I didn't write it longhand, and I didn't think about it for a long time. I wrote this book in 3 separate chunks on the computer. And so I wrote the first big mass of it. And I realized right away that this wasn't a short story. So I had to write to Jonathan, I'm so sorry, I'll write you a different one. I told him, unfortunately, I told him my idea. He was like, that sounds great, write it. And okay, well, and then I wrote him back. I said, never mind, you can't have it. It's not a short story anymore. And he said, Neil Gaiman did the same thing to me with Ocean at the End of the Lane. So, but I did actually write him a different one, and I was really proud of it. And so I wrote the first chunk of this book, and then I put it aside because I didn't know what it was. And then a couple months later, I wrote the second chunk, and I put that aside. I didn't even realize that they were related. And then I wrote the third chunk, and I thought, okay, this is all one thing. And so I printed it all out, and I cut it into pieces, and I started to lay it out to try to figure out how these things were all going to fit together. And then I had all this notebook paper that I was writing things in between. And so it became this big stack of messy paper that then became this. So it was a very different process.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
To move into the struggles and during the writing process and the publishing, in the New York Times, you mentioned having a traumatic brain injury in 2021. And you mentioned struggling with fiction writing. How have you since coped with fiction writing since then?
So it still is a struggle. So I struggle a lot with ear ringing, which writing fiction still triggers ear ringing for me. So I have a lot of limitations. And for a long time, I didn't think I was going to be able to write at all. My whole life I've struggled with anxiety. And one of the one of the benefits of having a traumatic brain injury, and despite all the terrible parts, is that I didn't experience anxiety anymore. Because I really could only hold one thought at a time. Anxiety, like depression, is narrative, because we have narrative brains, and so when we experience anxiety, what happens is we are stacking our thoughts, and we start to stack them so high that it's almost like, we're trying to hold these like tall things of plates, and like going around like this, like trying to not let them fall. And we're sort of like cycling from thought to thought to thought, and that's what keeps us up at night. It's why we can't let things go, right? Because I'm cycling through all of my stupid thoughts, so one of the benefits of my brain injury is that I didn't experience anxiety anymore. I mean, I would like be afraid sometimes, I would like be worried sometimes, but I couldn't really hold a thought for very long, and so I was blessedly relieved of that, which was kind of awesome. I still don't recommend a brain injury, but it was a sort of like nice little perk. A few years after was the first time that I realized, oh, I'm experiencing anxiety right now. I was like up at 2 a.m. and I was like cycling through my thoughts, and I thought, oh, here we are. And so I don't know if I'll publish again. I don't know if I have it in me. It's a lot of work to have a book go out in the world. So we'll see. But I am writing a book right now, and maybe it's just for me, and maybe I show it to somebody else. I have no idea. But it feels good to be able to write again. I am limited. I'm limited in how many pages I can write in a day. And sometimes it's only a paragraph, because it will trigger ear ringing, and it feels like needles in my ear, which I don't recommend. But it does feel good to be able to have a creative practice again. And I do like that a lot.
Bet. What was your favorite scene to write in this book, and what was the most difficult?
Oh man, I probably would have to say the prom scene is my favorite scene. Just that sort of that sense of joy and unboundedness, and also just I don't know, a bunch of naked kissing ladies. It was fantastic. It was so fun to write, and also that sort of sense of freedom. There were, I usually don't know where I'm going. There's two kinds of writers. There's plotters and there's pantsers, and I've been always a pantser, when I will write and I'm just as shocked as anybody else that has just happened, But as I was, the prom scene happened later after I had my 3 big chunks and I was starting to fold things in. And I was sort of re-experiencing the narrative and re-experiencing the voice. And as I was doing that, I started to have little flashes of a bunch of girls at prom, just like turning into scales. And I just thought, oh, I don't know how I'm getting there, but I know it's coming, and it was really fun. I think that probably the hardest parts for me were, when Alex is trying to hang on to Beatrice and doesn't want Beatrice to change, those were wrenching for me in ways that, in ways that became clear to me later on, like why they were so wrenching to me. But they came from a very deep place for me. Yeah.
Understandable. During the publishing process and after this book was published, was there anything significant that you had to cut from the final version that was a very hard decision for you?
That's never hard for me. Cutting things is never hard for me. And I'm not precious about my writing. And in fact, I'm, all of my writing comes in lots and lots of iterations. I number my drafts, so I know how many times I've had to go in and just completely revamp. And so there probably were things that I cut that like hurt me at the time, but I don't even remember it. I mean, I did have a brain injury, so there's that. But it is. But I think generally that is true. That I have. It is actually very easy for me to let things go. Because and it's off in a box somewhere, and maybe I'll reuse it later on. But yeah, it was. It was. That was never a big thing for me. So yeah,
I'm glad.
Yes, I have no problem killing my darlings. It's murder and mayhem all day long.
What was the most rewarding part of getting this published?
It's a really good question. This book is translated in Spanish, and so last year, or I guess a year and a half ago, I was invited down to Mexico for to celebrate the publication in Spanish, and my publisher, they were extremely intentional about it because they realized that the girls who read Girl Who Drank the Moon when it came out in Mexico were exactly Alex's age now. When or at least Alex is like at the end of the novel when she's in college, and so they were specifically marketing the book to them, and so I had this crazy experience of Mexico is a huge book reading country. Like their book industry is extremely passionate. Like I don't get recognized anywhere. I got recognized in Guadalajara. That's crazy to me. And but so I would be doing signing lines with these young women who'd show up dragging their boyfriends with them, and they had their brand new copy of When Women Were Dragons, and they also had their dog-eared old copies of Girl Who Drank the Moon, and that was really special to me to have readers that literally grew up with me. That was really, really special for me. But the other thing too is I think that and particularly right now, so I live in Minneapolis. There's it's been kind of hot in Minneapolis, and I get these messages from people saying, I think I'm dragoning right now, and that has become this for a lot of the women that read this book, it has become this rallying cry that they turn to me with. And so for a while I was getting messages like that, several a day. I'm pretty sure I saw scales, and so and that became this shorthand for them of living in this time of of frustration and rage, but also of not wanting to have to accept this limited life that somebody in power is offering to them. Oh, yeah. That the life I claim is bigger than what you're offering to me, yeah. And also, how dare you? And that feels very gratifying to me. That that there are women that are having that experience, and that are sharing that experience with me.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
it's beautiful. Now, talking about the book and how the press was involved and everything, and dealing with themes of censorship, have you, is this something you have seen in the world right now, and how do you feel about that?
Unfortunately, yes. We are in this unprecedented period of really outrageous censorship. So 3 years ago, my book, The Ogress and the Orphans, was a finalist for the National Book Award, and my husband and I had gone there for the ceremony, and most of the speeches at the time, that was the moment when it became clear that this was a national crisis, you know? And I think that it sort of stayed under the radar for a lot of people for a long time, that people didn't understand that this was an extremely well-funded, extremely well-organized assault on reading and thinking and imagination. That was operating on many, many fronts. But because it all started very local, or at least the actions were local, it was only covered by local news. This local newspaper, or that local news station, and people didn't understand that this was happening everywhere. At the time of the National Book Awards, it suddenly became clear that we had more book bans than anywhere than at any time, and it has only increased since then. Absolutely. So yes, I do have books that are banned. I have books that are banned in different school systems and different libraries. But what I'm experiencing is so minuscule compared to what my LGBT author friends are experiencing, where they are being banned everywhere, where my BIPOC author friends are being banned everywhere. My disabled author friends are being banned everywhere. And specifically Native authors. There's a particular animus towards them. It is unacceptable. And so yes, I experience it, but it's tiny compared to everyone else. It is an unacceptable time, and it is an assault on thinking and imagination, and being able to envision a life and a world bigger than the one that we're being offered. Yeah,
I totally agree. What is some advice that you would have liked to had in your career that you would like to share with others that would be in the presence of like publishing a book?
Yeah. So this is what I like to tell young writers, is the thing that stops people from writing is having excellent taste, actually. Like, the reason why you're doing this work and the reason why you want to do these creative endeavors, maybe it is, making a TV show, maybe it's being a journalist, maybe it's making a movie, maybe it's writing a book, maybe it's writing a screenplay, whatever it is. The thing that draws you is because you have excellent taste. You know what good art looks like. You know what good journalism looks like. You know what good movie making looks like. But when we are starting out, our taste is here and our skills is down here, right? We are not able to do what we know is good work. And that is so uncomfortable. And that is what stops people from doing work, right? And this is when people say, well, I'll just do this other thing. I don't have to actually tell stories for a living, And so what I like to tell people, one of the things that I really like to do when I'm talking to young writers is I say, because I number all of my drafts, I can tell you how many drafts it took to write these different books. That my first book, The Mostly True Story of Jack, I revised that book 45 times. Right? There's 45 different versions of that book on my computer. My second book, Iron-Hearted Violet, I revised that book 57 times. Right? My third book, The Witch's Boy, 75.
Oh my gosh.
And Girl Who Drank the Moon, it was 102. And so there is that when we are reading a book off the shelf, we are not reading somebody's first draft. All of our first drafts are really crappy. It's what a first draft is, right? And so what I want people to do, what I wish that somebody had told me, was to give yourself a break. You get to make mistakes on the page. You get to go back to that page and make it a little bit better. That we don't have to be daunted by the number of revisions, but rather it's an opportunity. Every time I go back into this, it's going to get a little bit better. And and sometimes it'll get a little bit worse, and then it gets a little bit better again. But this process of like slowly making things a little bit better over time is how we never get to where our taste is, right? The more skills we have, the better our taste, the more refined our tastes are, which means that we will never actually get there, which means it's a life of misery and pain. Ha ha ha. But that is how we make good art, right? Yeah. By just going back and making things slightly better, right? And learning as we do that, right? Yeah. All of those drafts were learning opportunities, and I feel grateful for them.
Thank you, Kelly, for taking the time to sit with us and share a little glimpse into your creative world. Your stories, your imagination, and the way you talk about the impact of storytelling reminds us all why we fell in love with books in the first place. It's been a real treat. So until next time, keep turning pages, keep telling stories, and keep chasing that spark of wonder. We'll see you next time right here at the BVTV Diner.